Welcome to the Wandering Tangent Podcast. I'm BJ, with me is Jeff, and today we're going to talk about the sci-fi classic Forbidden Planet.
So, Forbidden Planet. We're going to talk about non-spoilers first, and then talk about the things that some people might find offensive if they heard about before they saw it.
I believe the term looking for is spoilery,
Yeah,
not offensive.
spoilery. To spoil entertainment things, because people love to be surprised. Okay, so what did you think about Forbidden Planet, BJ?
I like Forbidden Planet. It's not like one of my favorite old-time sci-fi movies, but I like it.
Yeah, and you watched it as a kid, and now we're watching it, and you've seen it as an adult, so you have that whole experience of young and old.
I mean, truth be told, the only part I remember as a kid is the monster from the id,
Yeah.
because really, a lot of the plot's pretty highbrow.
Yeah, it is.
We kind of talked about this before, but I think we both agreed that Forbidden Planet would be like a really good Star Trek episode.
Yes. Yeah, anyone who likes Star Trek would probably really like this movie, because it's kind of like it in some ways. And you can really see how Star Trek at least got some amount of inspiration from this movie.
Yeah, because Forbidden Planet was 1956, and Star Trek was, what, sometime in the 60s?
Yeah,
Do you remember exactly
something
when?
around 67 or something like that.
Yeah. I tried doing a little bit of research on the how much or if Star Trek was inspired by Forbidden Planet. And from what I saw, so the general consensus seems to be, yeah, the Star Trek folks say that they were inspired by Forbidden Planet, but the only quote I saw was Ron Barry saying no, but
Okay.
then again, it is the internet, so who knows what's true and what ain't.
Yeah, who knows? There's a lot of fun things in this, though, with people on a spaceship, and they go somewhere and they investigate. So it's
Yeah.
a fun story, no matter what you might compare it to.
Yeah, and actually on that note, a couple of fun facts about Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet is apparently the first sci-fi movie to show a human-made faster than light ship, and it is also one of the first movies to take place. It is one of the first movies to take place on a planet besides Earth, like entirely.
Wow. Yeah, where they go to another planet. That's great.
Also, can I just say that I love the fact that the human spaceship is just a flying saucer.
Yeah. It's what aliens would normally use to come to Earth, but now humans are exploring the world.
Weird aliens
and the universe.
in a flying saucer, because why not?
Yeah. Well, I really liked the movie too. I really liked Forbidden Planet. My favorite thing about it is that I love a sci-fi movie that has mystery, where they have to problem solve their way through it, and this has that. And being as old as it is kind of is a bit of its charm to me. I love older movies, and I like movies that were made before everyone else made movies and kind of figured out how to make a sci-fi movie. This is early on, and people were still figuring out how to use this kind of genre. And yeah, it's really great that way.
You say people problem solving their way through, but it's basically like one character problem solving their way through, and the two other characters kind of just flirting with the love interest.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Because I mean, come on, let's face it. The Doc is like the best character. I mean, the Doc from the ship, not Dr. Morbius, even though Dr. Morbius is a pretty good character too.
Yeah.
But the Doc from the ship is basically the problem solver.
Yeah. Yeah, and the captain has to turn to him and say, "What do you think, Doctor?"
What do you think, Doctor? Or, I tell you what, Doctor, I'm gonna go over here and flirt. You solve this problem.
Yeah, there were some other things that just make you roll your eyes.
I mean, it is a movie from the 1960s, so 1950s, excuse me. So,
Yeah.
tis what it is.
Yeah. There are things that are just like any other movie from that era.
I won't say that the girl character is just kind of tacked on because she actually does serve a purpose in the story, especially in the finale, but there's a couple of scenes that are a bit gratuitous.
I would agree. It's like you have to have a girl, and she has to be young, and she has to be flirty and pretty and all that. But it's just part of the movie in those times.
So, some other interesting things about Forbidden Planet. It was nominated for Best Special Effects by the Academy Award, though it did not win. It lost to the Ten Commandments.
That's quite a movie to lose to.
And then in 2013, it was entered into the Library of Congress's National Film Registry.
Okay. That's a great honor, right? Honestly don't know much about that.
I mean, it's supposed to be, but I looked through the list last night. There's some movies that I personally would not look at and say, yeah, that needs to be preserved for future generations, but that's just me.
Yeah, and it wasn't added until, you said 2013?
Not until 2013.
Huh.
I went through the list last night and I got kind of upset at some of the movies that made on there before Forbidden Planet did.
Okay.
Let's just say that there's at least one person at the Library of Congress who is a musical fan.
Yeah, that's good. And it features a robot.
Robbie the Robot.
Or robot, as some say. Yes. Robbie the Robot. Really, the true star of the show is Robbie the Robot.
I mean, he is front and center on the poster, and on the back of the DVD case, which I have, which I did buy this movie, the first line of the movie description is, "A dutiful robot named Robbie speaks 188 languages." It's like, that comes into play never in the movie, but...
Yeah, he's not as good as C-3PO, who speaks millions, but he does speak a lot of languages.
They didn't really mention if there's, like, life forms besides humans, one way or the other. About the only kind of reference they make to it is at the very beginning of the movie, when they're approaching the planet. They get a signal, and the captain asks if it's human or not.
Mm.
So I don't know if they're just them asking if that's automated or if do have contact with alien species, but
yeah, I kind of get the impression that they don't. But there's a lot about this universe in it that isn't really explained. It's only one movie. It's not like part of a giant trilogy or lots of different TV shows where the universe is vastly explored. It's just one film standing by itself. So we both recommend that people watch it because it is a great film.
It's a great film. It's a classic. You can definitely see its fingerprints on many things, on a lot of later sci-fi movies.
Right, which we are not claiming as to what inspired what, because that's all conjecture. But it definitely seems like it, that a lot of things were inspired by this great film. But do you want to get into spoilers? Because that's my most favorite part, is to spoil everything and talk about all the cool stuff.
Okay, so what do you want to spoil first, then, since you're...
Okay, what do I want to spoil first?
Seem to be ready to go about.
Right at the very beginning of this movie, something just totally stopped me. And I had to stop and rewind and listen to it about 5 different times to make sure I heard it right. But in their introduction, they mentioned that humanity finally made it to the moon somewhere in the 21st century. And then in the 22nd century, it went out of the solar system, invented hyperdrive, and yeah, humans explored a lot of space after that. I just found it fascinating. This is before the actual real moon landing, and they're predicting the moon landing 100 years later. And it's a little tiny gem in that people in 1958 weren't expecting a real moon landing. I think it's evidence of that, of a little bit of culture that's now gone now, from 1958. And it says something about how when it did happen in 1969, how people probably felt about that. They were probably they really didn't realize that such a thing would happen in their lifetime. And so I just think it's kind of cool in their intro and how they talk about that.
I just looked this up because you made me curious. I mean, JFK's "We choose to go to the moon" speech wouldn't happen for another 6 years.
Yeah.
It happened in
Wow.
1962.
Yeah. Doesn't even have a lot to do with the movie, but it's just interesting. So that was the first thing. And later on, watching the movie, they have to slow down because they're going way too fast in hyperspace, whatever that means. They can't just slow down quickly because that would probably kill everyone on the ship or do something bad to them.
From going from faster than light to not light speed, they do slow down pretty fast. But it was interesting in that they do take measures to kind of protect the crew from the effects of the deceleration. They like get into what basically look like Star Trek transporters.
Yeah, the special effect they use reminded me a lot of that. They get into a beam and the beam goes over them and they glow and sparkle. Yeah. But apparently the beam protects them, so as they slow down, they don't, like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I thought that was a nice
splat
touch
against
because
the
that's
wall
not
or
something you see in
something.
a lot of sci-fi, like even nowadays. You know, like in Star Trek and
Yeah.
Star Wars, they just kind of pop out of warp or pop out of hyperspace, whatever you call it.
Yeah. They do have explanations for some of that. Like in Star Trek, they have inertial dampers that take the mean part of physics out of the equation so they can just slow down, or the ship doesn't wobble too much or something like that.
I forget exactly how warp is supposed to work in Star Trek. I'm not either.
I don't know. I'm not an expert of it. And there might be that they're not like it warps space so that you're traveling a shorter distance between 2 points, something like that.
Dang it,
I'm
John,
not a
I'm a
science
podcaster,
nerd.
not a science nerd. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's a cool thing with the device they have to slow down and to put everyone in the beam so that they're safe. And in fact, there's a scene that was cut out. It's not in the movie, but they did one filmed scene where the captain gets all huffy and mad because they were too close to the planet, or their trajectory was wrong and they nearly got destroyed or something, and he yells at somebody, "Hey, you're cutting it too close this time." And I guess they took that out. And in the normal version, the captain just looks around at his controls and he's like,
Oh,
"Okay, we're right there. We're right."
No,
where
that's
we
in
need
my
to be."
version. They like
Oh, is it?
get out of their protection beams or whatever, and someone's like, "It's kind of hot in here, isn't it?" And he checks him, he's like, "We're too close to the star or whatever." That wasn't in your version?
Oh,
Huh.
I don't think so. I have to admit, I watched it earlier this week, but I haven't watched it recently. But I watched all the bloopers last. I watched all the bloopers on the DVD that it came with.
I just watched the version I have copied to my computer. I didn't watch the actual DVD, so I don't know what features are on mine, but I think mine's comparatively bare bones. Yeah, mine just has the theatrical trailer, has special features according to the box I have. So now here's a question for you, kind of along the same lines of the technology they have. So they have these nice fancy beams to protect themselves from coming out of faster life space, but in order to get in contact with their chain command, they have to like tear the engine out of their ship and jury rig a communication device.
Yeah,
That seems like some oversight.
it does. Like,
I
they
mean, I
didn't
guess they
bring
have to do
anything
it
with
in-
them
I
that
guess
could
that's
do that.
happened in service of the plot because otherwise the question is, well, why didn't they just call for orders? Like, well, they have to take this and that out of the engine so that they're stuck there for 10 days so that Morbius can get mad at them.
Gee, now it makes me wonder. Yeah. That's a good question.
stunned you into
I need
silence.
to rewatch it again, I think. Yeah. I don't remember. Why are they stuck on the planet?
They're stuck on the planet because they
yeah,
have
they-
to take the ship apart to make the faster than life communicator so they can get orders on what to do because I don't know. Seem as they're there to check to see if the ship survived or not.
Yeah, there was a colony ship. The colony ship leaves Earth long ago. It arrives on this planet, and then they don't hear from them, so they suspect that everyone was lost or is in trouble. So they send a ship to go and investigate,
Yeah.
and that's the basic storyline.
Now that I'm thinking about it, this makes less
And
sense because I mean, come on, it's like you're sending this crew out, and so you're on. It's like a. How long did it say it took him to get out there? Half a year.
like a year, like a full year of space travel.
You're sending the ship on a year long mission, but in the orders, they say that the orders didn't take into account casualties among the colonists. It's like, isn't that why you sent out the ship to see if the colony was still there? It's like there's like one of three choices. It's like either,
Yeah.
okay, I guess worse. It's like either you can't find them, they're okay, they're dead, or a mix thereof. You could, you, you couldn't plan ahead for those four
Yeah.
eventualities.
They didn't have Starfleet training, is the problem. They were never mind. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, they seem very professional, the crew though.
Oh, outside the cook.
And they listen to their captain, and outside the cookie, we got to talk.
We kind of talked about
Cookie,
this before, and I know that you found Cookie much more amusing than I did.
Yeah, he's supposed to be amusing, but he kind of becomes a little bit of the Jar Jar Binks of the movie. The comic relief that didn't work out as well, but he does have a few moments that is funny. I really like how he asks the robot to make him a whole bunch of booze, and the robot does exactly what he says, and then he's shocked by it.
In my humble opinion, there's another fingerprint of the Forbidden Planet on Star Trek, because Robbie can basically act like a replicator from Star Trek. I mean, what they have him print off lead, they have him print off. I say print off because I don't know how else to phrase it. So I guess unlike a replicator, it can take time.
Yeah,
He just
he 3D,
he 3D
prints
prints
it.
booze.
He just he makes it somehow. Yeah, yeah, a huge pile of it too. Yeah, and of course, this being the Wandering Tangent podcast, we love to talk about things backwards, forwards, and in the middle of, and wander aimlessly through tangent upon tangent. So that is exactly the method of how we're discussing this. Is it just kind of goes everywhere. Robbie becomes a real entertaining part of this, and he was famous after this movie. They made a TV show. Well, there was a TV show about a group of people who go around and investigate stuff, and Robbie was on that show. And I watched an episode of it. It's pretty funny.
A little bit of research I did. It's probably a good thing Robbie was a hit because the making of Robbie represented about a little bit less than 10% of the budget of the movie.
So he was expensive.
Yeah, the number I found is that the making of Robbie was about in $1956 cost about $125,000, and to put it into
Wow.
perspective, the movie turned a profit of $210,000. So
this was not a profitable movie.
no, it was. That's not how much it made in theaters. That's how much profit it turned. So it paid itself off, and then made another $200,000, which I don't know how much that would translate into today's money.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it did turn a profit, so it was a profitable movie.
That's good. Yeah, he reminds me of the Lost in Space robot, but he doesn't look exactly like the Lost in Space robot. He's a little different.
I want to say that the same guy that made Robbie also made the robot from Robert Kinoshita. He made Robbie, and then after that he did make the robot in Lost in Space, so they were made by the same guy.
Okay.
And apparently, from what I read, again, and it's information I found on a quick search on the internet, but apparently Robbie made a couple appearances in Lost in Space.
Did he?
That's my understanding.
Wow. couple of appearances. Now I have to go back and find that and see it. It'd be interesting. I wonder if they have two robots on at the same time,
Yeah.
arguing with their
Yeah.
robotic
According to this,
personalities.
the robot appeared in 2 episodes of Lost in Space, and one of the first images it brings up is the 2 robots looking at each other.
Yeah, that's got to be good. Yeah, so let's see. Forbidden Planet. Another thing I really like is at the very beginning, when they start talking to Morbius. That's an excellent name, Morbius, the doctor. He doesn't want them to go to the planet, and he's all mysterious. And he says, "Oh, we don't really need your help. Thanks for coming. Goodbye." And that reminds me of Star Trek episodes too, because they often meet some scientist on a planet who doesn't want anything to do with them, and they don't understand, and they have to investigate either anyway. And somehow the scientist has a secret.
Well, Morbius is an interesting character in that, in this case at least, I think they do a good job of making him making him the antagonist without making him go like straight up bad guy.
Yeah, that's a really good thing about this. Is there's not really a villain in this movie, and that is a big spoiler of it. So watch the movie first if you don't like spoilers.
I guess that gets into some of the higher level stuff about the movie. Is that does the monster from the id count as being Morbius, or does it count as its own being since Morbius can't really control it?
Yeah, that comes down to what you think the id is, and people might have different interpretations of that. Because it's kind of him, but it's also not him. It's a part of him.
I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going into that in the least.
I'm not either, but I can sometimes speak like I know things. But I would interpret, this is my interpretation, which take it as you will, and it may or may not be correct, but I would say that it's like there's a part of the brain that people can't control so well, and it's, even though it's a part of them, they can't control it because there's other mechanisms in the brain that kind of provide a check and balance, that come in and say, oh no, that's a bad idea, don't actually do that. So like when you're dreaming, when you're asleep, things like you're in a dream, and then when you wake up, that's when you have all of your faculties, or something like that. Or if you're just out of it, like you're just feeling groggy or something, you may not be fully aware of everything. And so that's what this is. It's like the id, which is like the basic human instinct of survival, and just wants to survive, doesn't really care much about anything else. It's like when you're in the fight or flight, your instincts take over, and you run away from that creature that's chasing you. It's kind of like that. His baser instincts is what the id would be. And with Morbius, he's like this really smart intellectual. He has confidence of his intellectual ability and how he is smart. And I get the sense he thinks that he is better than everyone else, at least in terms of intellectualness. He's got a smart brain. Everyone else is somewhat beneath him. And he's a nice person. He's a good person. But I think one of the weird twists of the movie is that he thinks he's so advanced mentally, but then he finds out that he's also primitive like everyone else, and he has this id that's just a simple primitive intelligence that just wants to survive. And so the machine from the Kirill, it uses this part of the mind. Well, it just makes things appear that exist based upon what you think about. And the problem is there's this part of the mind that's very primitive that can step in and use that process to do harm.
To give a baseline definition of the id, going off the Merriam-Webster dictionary,
yeah, probably a better authority than mine,
is
my
one of the
explanation.
three divisions of the psyche in the psychoanalytic theory that is completely unconscious and is the source of psychic energy derived from instinctual needs and drives.
Sure. Yep.
So it's
What that says.
kind of basically what you said, and kind of going off what you were saying. You do kind of get the feeling that Morbius does kind of what's the word I'm looking for. He identifies more with the Krill than he does with humanity, seemingly at the end,
Yeah.
because
He's a huge introvert and he's a bit antisocial.
and just in case there's anyone listening to this who hasn't watched the movie and is just listening to us ramble on, so the Krill in this context were a super advanced civilization.
They lived on the planet. Yeah. So it's their native planet that they live on, and these humans happen to have built a colony on their planet, but it turns out the krill died long
So
ago.
on this planet is what basically amounts to an 800 square mile machine, and in the end, what they discover what it does is that the Krill had invented it. So basically, once the machine turned on, the Krill could create anything just by thinking about it.
It seems like the best kind of technology you can do. I don't have to do anything. I could think it and it happens.
Since the Krill were this supposedly super advanced civilization, they had kind of forgotten that how to phrase it. They didn't take into the fact that subconsciously they still had the baser instincts. Doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter how kind you are. There's always that thing in the back of your mind that even if it's just for a split second, you're gonna get angry at someone. You're gonna get mad at someone. So basically, on the same day that the Krill turned on this machine, they created their subconscious. Basically, created a bunch of monsters that literally wipe them out overnight.
Yeah, they gave this machine gave their mind so much power that it was able to just make everything happen that they thought about, and they didn't realize that some of their thoughts aren't really that great, and so they were destroyed by the physical
Yeah,
manifestations
it
of their
didn't just
thoughts.
manifest their conscious thoughts; it manifested their subconscious thoughts as well.
Yeah, so they weren't even aware that they were creating these things, and yet they were.
That's what happens with Morbius in this movie. The ship that not Starfleet shows up on keeps getting.
That's not
They
Starfleet.
mention
Yeah.
the name of their organization like twice, and I forget what it is. It's like the Union of Planets or the United Planets, something like
Yeah.
that. I forget.
Yeah, something like that.
But basically, the ship keeps getting boarded and sabotaged by some mysterious entity that's invisible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're attacked by
And
invisible
after the
creatures.
sabotage, this entity like kills the chief engineer, and then in what is probably the climax is probably the wrong word. The the big set piece of the movie is when the monster like actually attacks the ship while the crew's like ready and waiting for it.
Yeah, because it attacks them, and they think, well, there's this strange creature on the planet. Now we're going to stop it. We have technology. We're these cool space people. And so they set up a defensive field around a perimeter around their ship. And they have this giant auto turret cannon. And now you get 1958 space battle action against an invisible monster. Because of course it comes back
And then
it tries to
kind
get
of a
through all
kind of a
these
note here:
defenses.
the animation from the Monster of the Inn was done by Joshua Meador, who was on loan to NGM from Disney. Yeah, he had
From
been
Disney.
an animator at
Yep.
Disney since the very beginning. He worked on Snow White and all that, and he also worked on special effects in live action movies such as 2000 Leagues Under the Sea. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, while this is an MGM joint, there is some there's a little bit of old Disney in there too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the MGM special effects. And I'm not saying that as in, well, you compare it to modern day special effects, they're just not as good. I mean, I don't think that's a fair comparison of any kind. I mean, it looks great when you compare it to other movies from that time period. The planet looks awesome. The spaceship as it comes down, it looks about as real as you could make it from the 1950s. People wouldn't see Star Wars and 2001 Space Odyssey for another decade, more than a decade, really. The planet looks really great, and I love it when they have a miniature Robbie the robot on a little tiny hover vehicle, and it's speeding through the desert of the planet, and you can see it in a distance, and then it comes close. I love it. It really looks good.
And you kind of talked about it before with like the other turd things, and I'm not going to claim this idea as my own. I saw it on the YouTube comment when I was looking through clips of Forbidden Planet last night. But someone points out that sort of the attack sequence in Forbidden Planet, do you think that might have inspired the motion tracker in Aliens? Because at the very beginning of
The
the
motion
attack,
tracker?
since
I
the
mean,
monster's
possibly.
invisible, they're tracking it by radar or whatever, right? So pretty much the very first part of the attack is basically what happens in Aliens. There's a guy, man, machine, and he's telling them where the creature is and how close it is, and that's just a good way to build tension.
It really is, because they can't see it, but then it's close. Oh, it's perfect. It's really good. Yeah, I feel like a lot of sci-fi must have been, at least some extent, inspired by this movie. That's just what I feel like must be correct, because there's so many components of it that you can compare to other things. Yeah, so it's a cool scene. They have some good stuff, and they have little ray guns that shoot. I mean, they don't look as awesome as other sci-fi movies that would be, 1 or 2 decades later, but it's fun to see some of
So
the
funnily
early
enough,
on
they do
stuff.
call them blasters.
Yeah, they do call them blasters, and they fly through space using hyperdrive or whatever.
I forget
think
what
they
they
call
call
it
her
hyperdrive.
faster than light thing.
Yeah, whatever. But it would have been great to have a real monster come out, and I'm sure that they probably thought of that. But an invisible monster has cool things about it too, and with it being invisible, they did make footprints in the sand to show how the monster would be walking, and it's a really great special effect. They simply like lowered something from beneath a surface of sand to kind of let the sand fall, so it would show kind of a print. But it's cool looking, and you can see the steps of the creature as it sneaks up on them the first time it makes contact. So this is before the battle scene. So the first time it tiptoes up with its feet, and then as it walks up the stairs bend because of the weight of this huge creature.
No, yeah. I love everything about the monster from the id.
Yeah. I really love that they make the cast with these. They examine the footprint, and they use their computer to kind of figure out what the foot probably looks like based on the weight and the impression and everything, and how it probably would walk. And they have this big cast, and it's cool looking. It's real monster, strange, alien-like in its appearance. Yeah, and the doctor says, we looked at this foot, we examined it, nothing about it makes sense. It's like all the evidence that they bring in just adds more mystery to the plot.
So yeah, so the monster from the id is cool, and I watched this a little while ago, and I guess I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but when I watched it last night, I appreciate the sheer sense of scale, like the Krell complex.
Yeah.
I don't want to claim it's the first example of a bottomless tech pit. It's definitely very Death Star-esque.
Yeah.
I did find something online, so, again, the veracity of what I'm about to say is questionable because I did just find it on the internet. But one of the sound designers of Star Wars says that he was straight up inspired by a lot of the stuff in the Krell complex for a lot of the sounds on the Death Star.
Yeah. Well, how can you not be? All that. It has a weird alien sound, very technical sounds with everything. In fact, I remember reading something about it being one of the first times that a lot of the sounds were electronically generated. Like there's a whole group of sound effects people in MGM that were put together to do this, and they came up with new ideas that hadn't been done before.
I can't say about like the sound effects. I do know that the it's the first soundtrack to be entirely generated electronically. That was done by BB and Louis Barron. And I say quote unquote soundtrack because it's not really music, but I
I think, yeah, it's like just a bunch of somewhat musical stuff, but some of it just sounds kind of random and strange, and it puts the audience into this mood of everything around is weird and strange. I think that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to make people feel like they're in a weird place, and this is weird. This is a weird alien planet, and everything here is different. And I would almost prefer regular symphony music because I think that, I don't know, that seems to control the feeling of what's going on a little better. But the fact that they tried to do this, I find impressive. That they want to invent something new for their sci-fi, because earlier sci-fi than this is going to have traditional theme music like an orchestra and everything.
it's weird because I agree with you, but I don't.
Okay.
I mean,
What don't you agree
I
with?
mean the soundtrack it does have, I do believe it sets out what it accomplishes to do. I mean, like on a strictly just kind of listening to things level, I get the desire for actual music, but I don't know if I can imagine this movie with like actual music behind it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get that. Well, it seems like a lot of great ideas that this movie came up with seem to move on and be reused later by future entertainment. But one of the things that didn't, I would say, didn't really catch on was this type of musical score. There's a lot. I don't think there's a lot of other movies that have done that. It's something that is extremely unique about it. And so, future films wouldn't really use that kind of thing. They would go back to the symphony music, like in Flash Gordon and other things, where you have heroic, suspenseful, violins and violas and cellos and French horns and everything like that.
Probably from a strictly financial point of view, having actual music is probably better because then you can sell the soundtrack, but I don't know if they sold movie soundtracks back in the day.
Yeah, and I think that the sound is good. I don't think it's bad. It's it's just an idea that I didn't catch on as well.
It's something that definitely worked in that situation. Anything else you want to talk? I don't
So
know.
what else? Yeah, what else do we want to talk about?
We talked about the monster from the id. We talked about Morbius.
Oh, we talked about Alta, right? The girl.
I was about to say, how do you feel about Alta basically being a Disney princess?
Yeah. I like Alta the character. Some people are gonna hate her, but I don't know. She's good. She's a girl that's grown up alone with her dad on a planet with no one else around. So she's probably going to be very, I don't know, doesn't know much about, very innocent. And the first time that somebody comes along, um, she falls in love with the captain, which is one of the first men she's ever seen, ever. I mean, I don't think it says that she wasn't really around. I mean, she did know her mother, right? She knew her mother before she died.
I want to say Morbius says that his wife was the last person to die.
Yeah. Which means, now that we know the full plot, it means that Morbius's id killed everyone, but it wouldn't kill her. She was always safe from it.
She was safe in it until the end of the movie when. So basically, what turns Alta against her father was that at the very end of the movie, he's kind of cold about the death of the ship doctor, and that kind of turns Alta against him.
Yeah.
And this might be a case of making a man out of a molehill, but something I noticed during my last watch through this movie is that during most of the movie, Doctor Mobius wears like this black, not black. It's like pointedly not black. This dark brown suit that in certain lighting appears to be black. And then at the very end of the movie, when he's being a bit more aggressive, and it's revealed that the monster's the creature from his id, he's wearing this black robe, or maybe it's like a dark blue, on top of his brown clothing. So I don't know if they did that on purpose to kind of signal his antagonism and kind of villainy, or if again I'm just reading too much into it. But I noticed that on this last watch through, and I thought it was interesting.
Yes, they changed his clothes to be even more villainous. Like, I don't know, if I was to pick the real villain of the movie, it's the first officer who obnoxiously hits on Alta.
I mean, to be fair, Alta is kind of shunned down in the end, and when it becomes apparent that she has feeling for the captains, the first officer does kind of back off. True, he also does get brutally murdered by the monster right after that, but
yeah,
I guess let it be a lesson. Don't hit on the daughter of a mad scientist, or you'll die.
Yeah, especially a mad scientist that has a hideous id creature that manifests. That's like every paranoid dad's dream. I'll just have my id creature be summoned into the world and take out anyone that I don't like, that somehow flirts with my daughter. Yeah. Ugh. Well,
After that, your id monster is going to wreak havoc.
yeah, after that it will destroy my... Yeah. Oh my goodness. You know, it's a good thing I'm not attached to that machine, because I honestly think my id monster would destroy everything. It'd rampage through this town.
Well,
These prices are too high. Destroy the super...
So in today's news, an invisible monster blew up a gas station in some town, and somehow that made gas prices throughout the country go up by 20 cents. I know the whole point of this thing is to wander off on tangents, but
But that was quite a tangent, yeah.
I mean,
we seem to be doing it constantly, wandering off in tangents.
That is the name of the podcast. It is written on the tin.
Okay, so is there anything... Okay, I'll try to be... Is there anything you feel like you learned from this movie?
I mean,
from watching it.
It's not the first time I watched it, so on this watch through, I mean, I'm generally not that deep when I watch movies.
Yeah, I get that.
I know
that's fair.
That's a little bit of the difference between us. I think sometimes you kind of dig for the deeper meaning. I'm just kind of there to be entertained.
Yeah, I try to philosophize over it, and I enjoy a little bit of that, but in the end, I don't think any of the deeper philosopher type meanings you take from movies should be something that people hold on to too strongly. Because in the end, it's like a book. You read a book, you get something from it, you put it down. You read a book, 10, 20 years later, and it's a different experience. And it's all about what you take from it. And so interpreting movies is fun, but it's not something that I think people should be so strict on that they think that it's the only opinion that matters, or that it's the only thing you really can learn from a movie. I like it. It's a bit of a warning, though. Now that I've said that, I can philosophize freely, but I think that it's kind of like a warning of don't be too much thinking that you're perfect. Like, don't think that you're infallible and that you're so smart that you can't make mistakes. I think that's what the movie's kind of about.
They kind of say it at the very end, because as the planet explodes, because of course the planet explodes, the captain is comforting Alta by telling her that in like a million years, when mankind has reached the level that the Krell reached, that her father's name will shine as a warning.
Yeah.
What does he say? I'm trying to remember. Her father's name will shine as a warning and a reminder that we are not God.
Yeah, it's a good line. Yeah, it reminds me of the great famous Spider-Man line: "With great power comes great responsibility." The cue die scene after that, and then, but it kind of goes with that. Like, you're going to eventually become more powerful, and that's going to be a test. It's not just going to be an opportunity, because now you got to make decisions with all this new power. So it's a good theme for a science fiction movie about, yeah, because they, and he like he says, humanity is going to follow the same patterns as the Krill. They're going to invent new technology and they're going to become more powerful. What will become of them with all this power?
Guess moral of the story is you don't want your smartphone to be that smart.
Do you really want your smartphone to be able to have an app that manifests whatever you want, because it might turn out to be a hideous id creature that terrorizes people as they come to your planet to visit?
Oh, I guess one of the morals of the story is that obviously if nowadays if some scientist guy like walk up and say, "Hey, that's a great idea. I'll flick the switch and then everyone can make exactly what they imagine." By and large, enough people will be smart enough to say, "No, that's a terrible idea because my grumpy neighbor down the street will do this. This crazy guy over there will do that." And the downfall of the Krell were that they were so far advanced that they had totally denied that part themselves, but it still existed.
Yeah, they really thought that they were enlightened to the point where they wouldn't have any problems with their thoughts being manifested like that.
Yeah.
Their subconscious thoughts. Yeah. Because they had eliminated war. The Krill were an enlightened
Yeah, they were
civilization.
very advanced race, and I think Morbius says something along the lines of even as they destroyed themselves, they would have had no comprehension of what was going on because they thought they were so far beyond that.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, they would have. So they were in a little bit of denial as they were being destroyed, possibly, because they wouldn't have. Yeah, which is what Morbius does. Morbius, he was in denial about what was happening
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
as well.
That's exactly what happens at the end. Like I said before, Alta does have a part to play in the movie outside of just being the love interest, and her biggest part is that as the captain kind of confronts Morbius with all this evidence, that the thing tearing everything apart is part of Morbius or is kind of a projection of his subconscious. The thing that convinces Morbius of it is that his own daughter's afraid of him.
Yeah, that's something that he can't justify anymore. He can't quite just accept that as normal. He realizes that he's gone too far when his daughter is scared from what is happening. Yeah, it's the thing that finally trips his mind into realizing what everything is, what's really going on. Yeah, and I would say Morbius has quite the life on this planet. He's got a robot that he built that helps him do all the tasks around his house. He lives in this barren desert world, but he has this nice little oasis of plants and a nice house. And he has an office that leads to this giant underground world. And all he has to do with his life here on this planet is just study and learn. And he can go and use the Krell machinery to put information into his brain. And no one is there to tell him what to do. And he has his daughter there. And of course, he gets to take care of her and help her. It's not a great situation for her being alone on this planet, but he's kind of got quite the life. He's kind of, at least if you're an introvert, if you don't like going out and partying in a big group of people and you like being by yourself, Morbius has like the perfect setup
It's
of what someone like that
it's
would
definitely
want.
suggested that Morbius does not think too highly of humanity because it's kind of implied that
No.
Morbius could have left this planet whenever he wanted to.
Yep, he could have left, but no, he's
'Cause
got
at some
everything
point,
he
he's
wants
talking to
here
the crew.
on the planet.
He's like, "Yeah, at some point, as part of her education, I'll probably have to take my daughter to Earth." So he could have left at any
Yeah.
time, but he chose to stay and learn. And kind of later on in the movie, after he shows the complex to the captain and the ship doctor, when the captain says that the Krell complex is too big a thing for just one man, and that humanity as a whole should learn from this, the Morbius kind of says that he's going to be the gatekeeper of what the rest of humanity will get and won't get from the Krill complex.
Yeah, so he feels like if he did go to Earth, and I think this is part of an excuse that he has, but if he does go to Earth and tells people about the Krill, it's going to send a wave of scientists over to this planet. And he doesn't think that humanity should have that kind of exposure to something like this. It's just too much technology, and they wouldn't make good decisions with it. So he needs to learn about it and figure out what is good for humanity with it, because he doesn't think highly of humanity, which I I have to admit I'm a little bit on the fence of this. I'm not a full Morbius advocate fan, whatever you call him, but I do get his point that people are, they can sometimes be problematic. And do you trust him with all this stuff? Things like that.
Well, he mentions that one of the very first thing he did with what he learned from the Krell was make Robbie the robot, and all the guys from the ship are very impressed with Robbie and what Robbie can do. So
Yeah.
it's obviously a very big technological advance. So
Yes.
I want to say it's kind of a sci-fi trope that I don't know if it's a sci-fi trope or kind of how do I phrase this? That when one culture is introduced to a second, more advanced culture, that the less advanced culture will always be destroyed. But I don't know if that's really relevant in this case, since it's not really a culture, just technology. But I think you get what I mean.
So, like, the technology from the Krill would change a lot of things about humanity or in some way. And they might end up being
It's
hugely different than what they are at the point before they were.
like I said, I don't know if that's quite the right metaphor or saying in that situation, but
I do think that's an interesting thought, because if Earth had all this technology and they built a whole bunch of Robbie the robots, then they wouldn't have to work anymore. And then what becomes of them? They just sit and watch reruns of old movies all day long. Maybe we've already become that, PJ.
I don't know. I have to go upstairs. It's like I have to go upstairs to get my own water. I don't have
Never
a
mind.
robot to bring it down to me.
That's true. There are some things we still have to do.
They don't really talk about like what the culture on Earth is. I mean, obviously there's still like a military and all that because the crew organization is how do I phrase this? Because the ship's crew is still very obviously military. I mean, there's ranks. They have weapons. The quote unquote away teams all carry sidearms.
Yeah.
So mankind is advanced, but hasn't advanced beyond, I guess, the need for violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't know much about this world and everything, but yeah, we can definitely see that they still carry weapons and feel like they need to. And Morbius warns them that there's a great danger somehow. He doesn't describe much of what it is. So it could be that they're carrying weapons because they don't know what's going to happen to them, and they just want to be prepared. But they do.
Yeah.
They brought weapons with them.
They brought weapons, but not a way to call home without tearing apart the ship.
Yeah.
Now we loop back to the conversation we had at the very beginning of this nonsense. Anything else you want to say?
Well, that's probably good. We can have a closing statement if you want.
Closing statement. Don't date the daughter of a mad scientist.
Yeah, don't do that. If you go to a strange planet, just don't date the daughter of a scientist that you don't know anything about. Yeah, always be wary of the father. You never quite know how crazy they might be. Anyway, yeah, I would say that it's a really good movie. It's not one that I would watch over and over again frequently, though. I have a couple of movies I like to frequent, and this wouldn't be one of those. But I really like how much of the components of it that it has of what I think a great movie would be. It has a mixture of mystery, but then it also has a really good cerebral story. Kind of like it has the backbone of a Twilight episode.
I assume you mean
mixed
Twilight
in
Zone,
with
not
sci-fi.
Twilight.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of Twilight in it too.
love story than Twilight.
Yeah, a little. The romance in it is not great romance. And I'm not against romance movies or storylines. I'm really not, but I think the romance is just kind of thrown in there. Like, oh wait, but we have to have a love interest to keep so the audience can see that. Let's just kind of plop that in.
It does have its purpose in the plot because the romance between Alta and the Captain is what ultimately drives the wedge between Alta and Morbius, which is ultimately what leads to Morbius realizing that the monster is coming from him. So it serves its purpose, but it's not the best written romance out there.
No, and I think that audiences, especially back then and even today, they love the story of the main character and the main girl getting together. It's an old story element, but honestly, it doesn't do well for me personally. I know how the audience in general will probably want that kind of thing, but to me, the captain should have been more duty focused. So when he goes to the planet, he's not going to be looking to date the girl on the planet. He's going to do what's best for her, which is probably get her, as long as she consents to it, like get her back to Earth if she wants to go see Earth, and so she can meet other people and kind of figure out humanity and get some to be more socialized than what she's had on this planet being all alone.
Speaking of Forbidden Planet being sort of the prototype for Star Trek, that is a pretty Captain Kirk esque thing that happens there.
Yeah, yeah, and I have I could go on about Star Trek, you know that, but it's kind of the thing that the captain gets the girl, and in Star Trek they kind of do that. I don't think they do it as much as some of the people have commented about, because Star Trek has a lot of romance in it, a lot more than it later did. But the early show had a lot of romance, and it's not always involving Kirk. Sometimes it's another member of the crew. But it's one of those things like we got to have a romantic thing somewhere in this episode, so let's write it in here. But I think the Star Trek romance is better, and at least I can't speak to every episode, but I think in general a lot of it is more well thought and has more better
I will
lines
admit, I don't think
associated
I've
with it.
watched a lot of original series Star Trek, so I'm just painting broad strokes here. Just the trope
Yeah,
of Kirk getting the green alien girl.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't finish this project. I actually set out over a year ago to watch every original Star Trek episode and to keep track of the girl that Kirk has a romantic fling with and what the plot points involved with it. And I got like 1.5 seasons in, and then obviously I didn't follow through because I give up on most things that I try and do. But but I from
You
the
heard here,
little
folks.
data
Look
I
forward
could
to Jeff's
gather,
in-depth analysis
it's
of Kirk's many romances.
I know, and this is the new tangent because of course we always fall to another tangent. Um, I would say that the vast majority of them are uh, Kirk usually often doesn't. He has a romance, but he usually turns it down because he's got other duties on the ship to do. And there are a few times where it's not like that, where the he does flirt with the girl and they always somehow end up kissing, and that's as far as it goes on screen usually. Um, but it's usually to like do something, like he needs to teach the character something. One of my favorite ones is where he like teaches a girl about feelings and being human in order to help her somehow. So he like flirts and then kisses with her. Anyway, that's funny, but it's like this is according to his
I mean,
Starfleet training. He knows how to
that's
help
kind of a
aliens.
line the sleazy second officer, and
Yeah,
it's kind of line he tries on Alta, but Alta's well, I mean, they do kiss, but Alta's not very impressed.
yeah. Well, my main point I'll summarize in that, yeah, you could probably find a few occasions where the character of Kirk might have done something that you think you disagree with, but generally he actually does pretty well. It, there's probably just a couple episodes where he legitimately flirts with a girl and all that. The rest of it is there's other circumstances involved. And he often turns down romance too. He sometimes does that because he has duty, and he knows that he's a captain and he has to fulfill his obligations there. So, like, if Captain Kirk went to this planet, I don't think that he would flirt with Alta in this case, but I think some crew member probably would. But that's just me. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Anyway, we don't have to keep any of that. It's all way too. That's like way too conjecture. I think I'll save my. I think we should have a recording sometime where we talk about Star Trek, and then that's probably a better setting to actually discuss those things.
It's like, Jeff, do you know what the name of this podcast is going to be?
Yeah, wandering aimlessly, tangenting podcast. It's forever wandering. Not sure if it'll ever go anywhere in particular. Type discussion podcast.
Oh, heavens to Betsy. Okay,
So yeah, I don't like the romance in this movie. I don't like it.
So
It's creepy and weird. I don't like it. I honestly think the id monster is less creepy than the romance. Do I hear myself?
You heard here. You heard it here, folks. The main villain of Forbidden Planet is the badly written romance. No, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
You dragged us on long enough.
An hour and 20 minutes.
Okay.
Now we have a real monster, which is editing all this stuff. We have truly created our own id monster,
so...
BJ. A giant hour-long spiel that we now have to edit into what? Like 5 minutes of usable content?
No, man. The people are going to get most of this. This is... If you got this far and you were looking for something a little more concise...
But we don't
I'm
do
sorry,
that kind of thing. We couldn't even if we tried. We tried hard. We even planned and recorded this several times to be like, come on, we gotta like say something that is concise and easy to listen to, but we can't do it. We can't.
We are very honest in our advertising here. Okay. So now we're tangenting about the name, about how tangents in our name.
Yeah.
Maybe we should wrap this up.
Let's just kill it where it is.
Okay, so I recommend Forbidden Planet.
Absolutely,
Ticket,
give it a
you
watch.
recommend Forbidden Planet.
It is fun. It is fun.
It's one of those things every sci-fi nerd should watch at least once.
Definitely, at least once.
If any soul out there was brave enough or crazy enough to make it this far, thanks for listening. I'm BJ. With me was Jeff, and that was us rambling about whatever came up while we were talking about Forbidden Planet.